Ian, welcome. Fantastic to see you make some time during your holiday.
Thank you very much, Harmen.
I like the fact that this is quite informal, as a setting and how we're going to be talking to one another. I just want to talk for a minute about that this is a new podcast series, Harpinion, and we try to set aside the conventional thinking in the gambling and politics as is, and basically, get down more to the nitty-gritty detail of, let's say, what often happens and what does not get reported. So I need guests like you that are willing to speak up. So I'm extremely excited, for this conversation. And let's just dive into it.
There is what the textbooks tell you about gaming, and well worth reading. But then there's the reality, and the reality sometimes doesn't mirror the textbooks. And I think it's important that those things are identified and spoken about. It seems to be fashionable not to mention them, and that's something I find difficult to do. So I think if we have a sort of conversation that shows the gaming industry warts and all, then I think it's going to be far more educational than just reading chapter after chapter of a gaming book.
And outside of the fact that there isn't much of a gaming education in existence anyhow, and nowadays it seems like that a lot of people get let into the casinos without any proper training, but I'm sure we'll get back to that in a minute. What I'm really interested in is, how did you get in this industry? And basically, what did it teach you in the first few years that made you, stay for this length of time? Because it's a question I think that a lot of people will ask. This podcast is to be called, don't extinct the experts, right? Because we need our dinosaurs. We need the experience. And this is where I really would like to hammer on with regards to, what's happening in gaming, where, yes, without, let's say, diluting the importance of the younger generation coming into the industry, we still need the experience very much so.
Well, look, Harmen, that's a long time ago. Luckily, my memory still remembers. But I was being prepared and trained and to have a life as an accountant. Accountancy was my chosen field. And I didn't work for one of the big fives, but in the south coast of England, in the county of Kent, I was articled to a partner within a large multi-practice firm of accountants. It was obvious that this wasn't really the life cut out for me. I couldn't be the stereotype of an accountant. So I saw a job advertised to go and work for a gaming company. In those days, it was a company called Pleasure Armour. Pleasure Armour had multiple casinos around the coast. They were minority shareholders in some London casinos, but pretty much they were provincial casino operators. So I started in the Tiberius Casino in Ramsgate, and I did the training school. What happened is I didn't get the accountancy position, but they recommended that I joined the training school, which I did. I found the training stimulating. It was a group of people, and I took to it. And I learned the three basic games, which in those days were Puntabanco, roulette, and blackjack. After getting my competency as a dealer, I then, remained a little longer after 18 months and became an inspector, a blue license holder. And again, the business was very interesting to me. So I then asked the management if I could cross-train in every other aspect of the casino. So they put me in reception, they put me behind the cash desk. So I learned the business from the bottom up, and pretty much in all the departments. Then what happened is I was offered a green license, but it meant I would have to leave the south coast of England and go to either Bristol, Cardiff, or Leeds. And rather than do that, I decided to go overseas and went to work for Holiday Inns, which later became Sun International in Southern Africa. And that was after 5 years of starting in the business. I ended up in Southern Africa.
During those times, did you really get a feel for, let's say, what it took for someone, let's say your owners, in order to run the casinos? How much political opposition was there at that time? How much, let's say, did you get confronted with it? I mean, at the moment we get confronted with very conflicting opinions, etc. But I can imagine you got a lot of questions at that time. Why would you end up in this industry? This is not the right industry for you. This is not what you should be doing, etc. Or it wasn't that bad.
It was an entertainment industry. I was very comfortable in front of people. I remember the first night on the tables, a lot of members of the training school that I was in found it nerve wracking that their hands became wet and they were stuttering and mumbling. I didn't have that with myself. I found it quite therapeutic. I found it quite relaxing, and dealing front on with the customers. It was very rewarding. The one thing in those days, and I'm talking about 1977, 78, was there was a far higher discipline within the casinos. The pit bosses were daunting characters, and some of the inspectors were as well. So after you'd, well, in my case, after a bit of entertainment on the gaming table, as I walked off, the inspector would lean down from his chair and said, "Cut that out. We're not here to perform. We're here to deal the games." And that was a point I took on board very early, and found it alien to what I was really doing. The entertainment side of it was my character. So to stifle that wasn't what I really wanted to hear. But and you were all threatened with the ultimate, which, if we have to, we'll send you to see the general manager, which was like the ultimate threat.
Right.
The last thing you wanted to do was be paraded in front of the general manager and take a dressing down. And having come from a public school background, I knew exactly what it was to do the march to the headmaster's office or the general manager's office. Luckily, the general managers in those days didn't have a cane, and you weren't given six of the best.
So fast forward from there, you left, let's say the table side to go to the technology side, to the slots, which is quite interesting because, well, most people actually that start as dealers don't make it to that side. And generally they're attracted from outside into most land-based casinos.
That was a concentrated effort because, fortunately, I moved quite rapidly with Set Sun International. And by the time I reached 25 years old, I was general manager of my own casino in Swaziland. And what bothered me was the slots guys seemed to have a language and phraseology that was there to baffle anybody that came from a table game background. It was they had slots as a science that takes many, many years to learn. Because of this approach, I was left in the dark and couldn't really ask the pointed questions I needed to know on the slots industry. So when I left Swaziland and went across to Mauritius, where I was looking after three casinos there, the slots operation was even bigger. And the
Right.
Mauritians have a notorious way of being, let's say, quite secretive about what their job is. So again, the meetings were pretty silent when it came to discussing the slots, which contributed to a large percentage of the revenue. So after Mauritius, I went on to the Seychelles, again, a slots operation. So when I finished in the Seychelles, I went to the UK and decided to get a job and learn slots. I knew that wasn't going to be capable of doing that within a casino environment. So I actually went to work for the IGT distributor in London, a company called Casino Coin, and they allowed me to go to Reno, where IGT really taught me the slot industry, not how to repair them,
Right.
but understand the mathematics, understand what's a good game and what's a bad game. So then I believed, equipped to be able to hold my own in the slots environment.
Interesting move, right? Because I mean, you went from a management position, running a casino, to, let's say, going back into, no, call it a sales management position, right? I guess that's what it was.
Exactly, that's what it was. And I So at the same time, also I learned all about the other equipment that was involved. Coin counting equipment, signage, tokens,
Yeah.
systems. Working with companies
Yeah.
like Micon, so it was a great learning experience, and something I'm really happy that I did it. And when I came out from that, I was actually recruited by Swiss casinos to go over to Colorado and oversee the opening of a new casino in Central City, Colorado, which was predominantly slot machines with no tables in the beginning. So here I was moving from a live table game field to a slot side, and then opening a casino in Colorado, which was all slots in the beginning. We didn't have any tables. And, that put to test everything I'd learned. And luckily, it paid off.
Let's talk a little bit about, let's say, the switch that a lot of people have seen over the last, let's say 30 years, where originally it was all live gaming, and then it went more to the slot side. I mean, I saw that firsthand massively when I started selling the equipment. I mean, I delivered the first new slot machines into the Russian market in 1993. And I recall that at that time, everybody said, "Oh, slots are not going to work. Slots are not going to work," etc. And it took many years. It took a number of years before it really took off. But that's another story. But the point is, initially it was all live games. Then it went that people got used to the slots, and then the slots started to take over. The same as effectively what happened to Las Vegas, right? Which now is about what 80-20.
Yep.
80% of the turnover is
Yep.
slot machines, 20% is tables. Where do you feel, or what is, let's say, the characteristic of the player when the player shifts? Because obviously, players that are first on live games must switch to the slots, or more people come in onto the slots. How do you explain that situation?
When I got to Greece in 1996, and the casinos, and you've got to think the three of Europe's largest casinos were now going to be in Greece, from Loutraki to Montparnasse and to Thessaloniki. So the three biggest casinos in Europe were all going to be in Greece. And as we opened Thessaloniki, the tables were considered, I think 3 weeks before we opened, we crammed in another 20 tables, believing that's where the future lie, especially with the Greek market. So every inch of space was turned over to a table, not to a slot. And we opened the casino with 600 slots. And in the initial opening, it was the right move. We had tremendous table game play, and slots were producing no more than 14% of the revenue. Then what began to happen is the popularity of the slots, as it does anywhere in the world, starts to take a foothold. And it wasn't so long before the tables were beginning to disappear and the slots began to, let's say, strengthen. And one of the successes I believe that we had and still maintain it in that casino is we had such a diverse set of slot machines that we were accommodating a very broad customer base rather than what the other casinos had done in Greece, which was take TCS John Huxley tables and running a TCS, running an IGT system and running IGT machines. So if you look at the casinos in Greece, they were all pretty much the same. But when we opened Thessaloniki, we put 5 manufacturers in. We used a different system. And I think that was a lot to do with why Thessaloniki Casino remains popular and in actual fact outperforms the casino of Loutraki and the casino of Montparnasse, which are obviously, feeding off the Athens market.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to that later, because Thessaloniki has a lot of interesting stories for its development leading position in the European market and in generally the initiatives and innovations it introduced. But let's talk a little bit about the Greek politics, right? I personally, led the Playboy Casino, opened the Playboy Casino in Greece. We originally still had, let's say, a charge of approximately, if at that time it was still the Greek drachma, before the euro, that was prevalent, and that was the currency. And the charge was approximately 16 comparably $16, which was way too high. Any tourist that walks into a casino is not going to pay $16 first, then to see if he likes it, if he likes the environment, if he likes to hang around, if he, wants to spend some. And if he wants to spend some, that $16 should be spent and not something else, not as an entrance fee first. So how do you feel, the Greek government looked at this and treated the casinos with regards to what it did originally in order to open them up, and then let's say the whole change to what it is today, because it's an incredible story.
We did a lot of homework on what the Greek potential market was, not within Greece, but across the border in what was then the FYROM, the former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia. So there were a lot of casinos along the border of FYROM and Greece, and we did some studies on those casinos. At that time as well, we asked Price Waterhouse to do a study, which I can tell you was just so far off. It was laughable, with understating what the
Positive or negative?
negative.
Oh, wow.
What they were projecting as revenue was a joke. It was just so, it was a real cover your ass number, where coming very low, and then we can't look silly, and that's what they did. Now, and when the Greek propensity to gamble, in my opinion, and having travelled the world, the Greek propensity to gamble is only second to the Chinese, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And if you go around the world,
I would even say it's first, but we can argue about that, because I think, for the size of the population, the number of people playing, I think the Greeks play much more than the Chinese.
And Greece has this anomaly, which is as many of them that live in Greece, there's as many living outside of Greece. So the cities of Melbourne, Toronto, Johannesburg, where there's a big Greek population, there is always strong gambling. And because that's the Greek mentality. And I have said this to numerous Greeks: you're not the smartest gamblers, but you're the most enthusiastic. It's all played from the heart. There's not a lot of thinking that goes into it. So
Yeah.
the Greek public are, that's where they're comfortable. But if you should ever ask them, do you visit the casino? No, I don't go to the casino. No, that's not the place where you'll find me.
No, exactly.
So I don't know who goes, but they won't admit to it. So
Right.
the casino business in Greece was such an eye opener, and Hyatt made very well, and the Greek ship owners made very good negotiation with the Greek government. And you talk about a 16, 17 euro entrance fee, but of course we never paid that.
Right.
We paid a much, much reduced entrance fee
Yeah.
in Thessaloniki, because we had a dispensation, because we were a foreign company and we were investing sizable funds into Greece. We were allowed to have a written down entrance fee ticket. So while all the other casinos were paying the high fee, we paid in Thessaloniki the same fee as a Greek government-owned casino, which was Corfu, Montparnasse, and casinos that were owned by the Greek government.
Yeah.
And then when we took over in 2003, we took over the Montparnasse Casino. Again, we could maintain the low fee against Rhodes that was paying 17. We were paying the equivalent of 6. So this all then, was taken to court, and in the European courts, and said this was an unfair advantage. The main protagonist was Loutraki Casino, and it went through a whole court process. But in the end, it was found, though, you can run at that lower fee, and all the necessary documentation's in place for that to happen. Well, as it happens now, there is no entrance fee. That was abolished, and all the casinos run on the level playing field.
I mean, it's amazing how governments often, start with one particular policy, go to another policy, right? We see it left, right, or center, especially around the European market. We see it internationally. But the biggest issue that I often have is that the government is so incredibly, let's say, badly informed, not informed, inexperienced, not knowledgeable. And yeah, they put somebody in charge. Somebody comes from the bureaucracy somewhere, somehow, starts learning the business, etc. Yes, they can learn. Of course, they can learn. But it's a little bit different when you have been running, the businesses within, when you understand the cash flow, when you understand, let's say, the challenges, versus what you see on the outside, right? Because a lot of people always think, oh, the casinos make that much money. So what, in your view, is, let's say, a lesson that you learned? And for now, I'll hammer on Greece, and then we'll go to some of the other countries that you've been active in. But what are those lessons that you say, like, oh my God, I really would have, wished that the government looked at this differently or done differently, and how could it have been done differently?
I think one of the most relevant conversations I ever had was with a government official from the Ministry of Finance, who, I think it was on the opening night of Thessaloniki, said to me, without doubt, you're going to be the Ministry of Finance's best employee. And I said, how do you work that out? And he said, well, you're going to be the taxation on the black economy. He says, as these doors of this casino open, the black economy is going to come pouring through those doors. And he wasn't wrong.
No, he wasn't wrong, but that's a smart comment. That's a good comment.
He understood exactly what it was. We were going to tax the black economy. And banknotes in their carrier bag fulls were arriving at the casino. Some of it had been buried. Some of it had been hidden in barns or wherever it was. So it was pretty shoddy money, and it was drachma notes in those days. And there was a lot of smelly notes. There was a lot of wet, damp notes. But these were all coming in. And of course, the drachma, there wasn't a really big drachma note. So when people bought in, you had to use 2 roulette tables to lay out the notes because there were so many. And the drop boxes just weren't big enough to do the drop. The government had realised, well, we had introduced non-negs and said let them buy in at the cash desk. The government worked.
Non-negs is non-negotiable.
Yeah. We don't want you to do that. So yes, it had its issues when we converted to the euro. Obviously, that problem disappeared. But yes, we were a taxation on the black economy. And I
How
remember
much was
when
the taxation? How much was the taxation?
In those days, 30. Well, there was central tax of 30%, and then provincial tax of 2%. So we were running a tax of 32%.
Yeah, so 32%, just for the listeners, is from the top, okay, from turnover. Because most people don't understand, right? They don't understand how heavily casinos are actually taxed.
So it's top and bottom. There's a GGR tax that comes off the top before any expenses or taxation or anything. And then at the bottom, you've got the normal standard corporation tax that is going to hit you on the bottom line. But, luckily, the margins were very strong. Luckily, the payroll as a percentage against GGR was quite low. And also, which is a big issue, is we had no credit, so there was never a bad debt. And the second thing, you didn't have to market the casinos.
Yeah.
The people just poured in. So all your big expense lines were quite small. And you could exceed a margin of over 40% quite easily.
Yeah, 40%, that's still an incredibly healthy margin. I think today you don't make that anymore.
No. You see, again, roulette was 62 to 63% of total revenue. Well, as we all know, you can't get better at roulette. You just get your brains beaten out. Maybe you can make it last a little bit longer, but you're not ever going to improve at roulette. They slowly turned to blackjack, but as a blackjack working basic strategy, they didn't like that either because of this emotional way of playing.
Yeah.
It was like they'd spend all night disciplined playing. Then in the last hour, they would go absolutely crazy, lose it all back that had taken them 6 hours to win. So it wasn't the smartest gamblers in the world.
So then when you start looking at how the Greek government had a hold on the casinos, because you had actually inspectors in the casino.
We had government inspectors, but the government inspectors enjoyed 3 things. One was smoking cigarettes, They like drinking coffee, and they like to be speaking on their mobile phones. So because of these three, the majority of them like to sit in the office. Now, what we would have to do is, if a jackpot or a fill was needed on the table, or a jackpot or a hopper fill in those days, because we had tokens, you went to the office, they signed off on it without ever really inspecting where it was going or what it was for, because they perhaps there was a football game on the TV, and they would do that. Now, I'm not saying that was all of them, but I was saying these were the older ones, because the inspecting force that was used in Greece were pretty much ex-dealers from Montparnasse Casino or any of the other government casinos, because they were the best they had at understanding gaming.
Yeah.
And so they were promoted to gaming inspectors who were going to work for the government to check things.
Right.
Well, now we don't have it. Because in Greece, making the more jobs as possible is a big pastime, because you've got to have a lot of people who are civil servants.
Yeah.
You have to have it.
Yeah. No, exactly. As a percentage, they're pretty high. So, you as a expat have survived quite a long time in the Greek market. Where do you, you know, what do you think is the reason, other than you're very good at what you do, which we know, but I mean, in general, what do you feel? Because in most countries, the foreigners are being ousted or somehow, you see what's happening in Macau, for example, right? I mean, they don't want the foreigners to really run the casinos anymore, etc., or as little as possible. So, from your experience again there and in other countries, how come and why so many expats still in casinos?
Look, in Greece, when we opened Thessaloniki, we chartered a plane or planes and brought over nearly 400 expatriate staff. And that varied from good dealers to inspectors to pit bosses to managers. So we brought in a lot of expatriate staff, which was, we had to find housing, we had to find, there was a lot of ancillary costs. But what was always going to happen is there was going to be a localization program implemented, perhaps after the 10th year. That was always the plan. But even after 5 years, we started also letting the numbers go down. I think Thessaloniki was a company that didn't work to the Greek standards, but it worked to international standards, which made a big difference. And when you look at who the partner was, it was Hyatt, and the Hyatt Group were Nevada licensed. They had some very, let's say, prominent locations around the world, so they could never allow licensing issues to crop up in Greece, which was considered the weakest link within the Hyatt chain of casinos. So it was very important that we really did do our jobs properly. And as I said right at the beginning of this, I was brought up in a casino environment which was highly disciplined, where people, were held to account for sloppiness. And we had, dress codes. We had certain things that weren't going to slip. And I believe that Thessaloniki, still to this day, is a very disciplined casino environment to work in. And it was not normal in Greece. Greece, let's have a meeting at 10:30. You're lucky if they're there by 11:15.
Yeah.
Let's turn our phones off because we need some privacy in this meeting. Well, during the meeting, you'd have 7 phones ring. It was like the habits were hard to break, but we did the best we can, and we managed to achieve a lot. Nowadays, let's say in Montparnasse, we have one expatriate, and with myself finishing with Regency and now purely acting as an advisor to the board and to the shareholders, there is not an expatriate working within Thessaloniki Casino.
Right.
So the localization program did happen,
Yeah.
and it worked very well. But what we also noticed is there was such a high retention of people. People took a job
Right.
and didn't move on. We
Right.
didn't turn over staff. We didn't turn over managers. So it was, and then of course you had the opening of Cyprus that took some of our managers and some of our mid-level managers. But people stayed. But one thing I want to quickly say before I forget is when the finance Ministry of Finance spoke to me, they said to me, and we'll add to this black economy taxation with the tourists. And I said, you won't get tourists.
Exactly.
So he said, why? Why? And I said, because tourists don't make a concerted effort to take money on holiday to gamble with. They take it for English breakfasts, they take it for a Guinness, they take it for having more to drink. They're package tour people, so they pay before they leave. They certainly don't put money in their pocket and say, well, that £500 is for gambling. That's not how the mentality is. So Thessaloniki, which is a touristic city, handles no more than 2% of its general attendance from tourists.
But they do get quite a few from across the border, right?
You get across from the border, correct? You get across from the border. You get from Bulgaria.
Yeah.
You get from Turkey. So you get players from there. The Fyrom, or now it's Macedonia, those casinos are still there. They're still thriving. And if Thessaloniki Casino doesn't keep on its toes, it can lose business to across the border. And so Thessaloniki is always struggling to make sure it maintains its level of attendance by not letting the Macedonian casinos, let's say, sneak up on them and steal their customer
Is
base.
the government doing everything right in order to support the casino industry in Greece?
The government have to be encouraged. If the easiest thing is to sit on your ass and do nothing, but the government have to be encouraged. They have to be, stop across-border casinos advertising. You've got to stop them being all over the radio stations. You have to stop them having, let's say, fast track across the border and fast track coming back. You have to make sure that the necessary currency controls are being adhered to, that crossing the border, no one's travelling with too much money, and coming back the other way, people aren't travelling with too much cash.
And what about the online side? I mean, the online side must have put a big dent into, let's say the operations. And if not, or if, why hasn't the land-based taken more advantage of the online? Because it's all in the hands of, spin-offs of Lopap and others.
If you were to do a survey within Montparnasse or Thessaloniki, you would find that there is no more than 35 to 38% that are dualist. In other words, they play online and they play in the casino.
You think it's that low?
It's that low.
Okay.
It's that low. We've run the exercise,
right,
and it's that low. The table game players are very dedicated to the table games. And are they playing live casinos online? No. The slots, there's many duelists there that play online slots. They play VLT slots in the streets with OPAP, but because the VLTs in the streets have this very low bet, let's say the players shy away from it, and the pay tables on the VLTs are so watered down. It's not really an exciting experience. But the government, if you could have your wish, you'd say to the government, get off your ass and close down the illegal, because the illegal business in Greece is the same size as the legal business. It's still so prominent.
Is it still today?
Still today.
Wow.
It goes down and it comes back up. And people say, well, why? Well, it's because the tentacles of illegal gaming run very deep in Greece. Yeah. And there's, Greece has a government, but it also has the big families. The big families control a lot. And so, there's a lot of, how can I say, there's a lot of things a blind eye is turned to because of who is behind it. If you were to investigate all the way back to the source, you would come up against quite a prominent figure.
Okay, interesting. Now, if we talk about, for example, the future of Greece, and now I'm going to take Cyprus into the picture. Cyprus has opened its first, well, basically Europe's first integrated resort, quite a sizable property. What's good and what's bad about it, and how does it affect Greece?
It doesn't affect Greece in a negative way. The negativity came at the beginning when it took some of our staff, but we
Right.
survived. The other thing is we actually saw an influx of southern Cypriots coming to Montparnasse and to Thessaloniki because in Greece they were invisible. They were playing, and they were playing sums that they didn't want the authorities in Cyprus to see just how much they were playing. When Cyprus made its decision who to bring in as the regulator, they brought in a very hard-nosed regulator out of the UK. Now, we all know that the UK is a very strict jurisdiction. Well, what happened in Cyprus is they pretty much used that as a template, and then went a little bit further. So out of nowhere, Cyprus became a highly regulated gaming environment,
Right.
even though there was only one casino.
Right.
So still to this day, that casino has to jump through every hoop to keep its license, and the threat of losing your license if you do this. So AML, KYC are very strict. But within 5 kilometers, 3 miles of that, you've got Northern Cyprus. And Northern Cyprus shouldn't be thought of as corner shop casinos. You have got some massive, luxurious properties
No,
there.
comparable, absolutely comparable to what you have in southern. I mean, okay, it's not 5 miles, it's whatever, right? If you cross the border from Nicosia, fine, but not if you start talking about, getting from, let's say, the Limassol based, integrated resort in southern Cyprus, the only one that's there, versus, going to the north. But then, of course, you have a satellite casino in, Nicosia, and that's indeed very close to the bigger ones. And that's only a satellite, and that primarily has a few tables and, 50 slots. So,
From what I'm understanding, is the new Nicosia casino, which will be opened by the Concord Group, will be the largest number of machines and tables in any location in northern Cyprus. So that's right in Nicosia. You walk across and you walk to the casino. It's another Nova Goritza.
yeah, so then it will all change, exactly. I still feel that the government, really clamps down on the land-based casinos, but relatively less related to the online casinos. How do you feel can the government, improve that? Because I mean, it is a big issue, right? I mean, you're also in Albania right now, for example, and in Albania you also see a number of these side effects between, the online and the offline. But the offline is there, I believe, more powerful.
You see, in Greece, um, online has taken hold, and it has taken hold very quickly, and it is now very relevant. What the government realise is that, okay, they gave them a higher taxation, but still it didn't stem the growth of what was happening online. What the government won't do is adjust the regulations to run online. What they do is they give little bones to the land-based industry and said, look, we can't stop what's happening online, and it's going to continue to grow, because the argument was always, well, if you carry on like this, you'll have no land-based industry, and if you have no land-based industry, then all the employment and unemployment and what have you all disappears.
Yeah.
You see, and when you look at Greece, the casino of Loutraki is barely staying open. The casino of Montparnasse and the casino of Thessaloniki are positive in every aspect. Rhodes is positive now in every aspect. But the other casinos aren't worth mentioning because, Rio Casino is closed. Corfu Casino
Yeah.
is barely keeping its doors open.
Yeah.
So Greece, with all these people and with all these big gamblers, well, 4 casinos are keeping their head above the water,
Right.
and one of those casinos is going under the water because it just costs too much money to operate it.
But is Greece setting the example for casinos across Europe, the world? Is that the way land-based is going to go? I mean, I still feel that, for example, when I look at integrated resorts, they definitely have a chance to survive, right? Because it's a complete entertainment concept, right? You have a lot more than just a gambling floor.
I think integrated resorts in Europe, because the European mentality isn't we pack the car, we put the kids in there, and we drive to an integrated resort. Every casino in Europe pretty much is a locals casino. People seldom travel in Europe to look for gambling. Now, in the United States, it happens. In South Africa, it happens. In Australia, it happens. But Europe is very insular that way. The French gamble in French casinos.
Yeah.
The Germans gamble in German. They don't pack their bags and go on a integrated casino resort holiday. It's not part of their mentality. And Hard Rock are about to open a very expensive integrated resort in Athens. But when you look at that, what really means if that's going to work or not is how much of the local play they're going to get. Because at exactly the same time as that opens, the casino of Regency in Mauritius will open, and that will be a casino that's going to pitch purely at the local market, no dependency on the high end. So that casino, and it's coming to market at a much, much lower investment price, has a very good chance of returning on investment because its spend to open it is low. Cyprus, Malco Resort there would have done much, much better if it didn't spend so much to open it.
Yeah.
And, with the regulations there and, what it cost to open it, the equation wasn't good. It just put too much pressure on the building. And then they had to raise money. They had to borrow money at very high interest rates. And the next thing, the property goes under pressure because the very large sum to open and then the very tight restrictions to operate, when across the border there aren't those restrictions.
Exactly.
So, we all remember Sheldon Adelson floating the idea of an integrated resort in Spain. That never happened.
Exactly.
We all heard about one that was going to happen in Hungary. That didn't happen. So there's been a lot of talk about integrated resorts in Europe. But really, the one that's going to be the most successful, I believe, will be Regency because it's pitching at the local market. It doesn't have to start moving high-end players and bringing them in. The Regency investment is going to be 300 million. The Hard Rock investment is going to be 1.6 billion.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a lot of play.
Yeah, exactly. That's a lot of different money that needs to be returned.
If you were investing that sum of money, you would say, well, what is my revenue from rooms? What is my revenue from food and beverage? What is my revenue from theatre? Now, Greece doesn't have that model. The customer in Greece still wants cheap food. He wants free drinks. He wants discounted rooms. So you haven't got a strong a good revenue stream apart from what you see on the gaming floor.
You always wonder who was advising Hard Rock, to make that investment and to think that it will be the greatest project. So that's what I'm saying. You can't be extinct yet. We need you in order to make sure that we can continue. Let's say making those improvements, because I still think that there is a plateau in which from offline. One of the thoughts could be that there's so much online nowadays in Europe that some of that can actually be turned back into offline locations where people could actually have a community together, play together, entertain together.
Correct. The land-based industry, and I was one of them, made the biggest mistake by not accepting that online was coming And if you decided to fight against it, it was a losing battle. If we in the land-based business had adopted online, we would be the key operators in the world today. But what we did in the land is we just said it's a flash in the pan. It will never take traction, and online will disappear. Well, over a very short period of time, you began to realize this isn't disappearing. This is going to be with us. But already, the land-based industry had already taken its position, which is we will fight it, we will stop it. Sheldon Adelson being the largest voice there was, that we will do everything we can to stop online happening.
What's interesting in that, just to interrupt for a minute, is if you're on the land-based side, you invest in an asset. I can feel it. It's like somebody investing in real estate. I can feel it, instead of, the guy that's basically saying, I'm going to put it in the stock market and hope for, that the company will not screw up. The problem is with online, there's a lot of marketing that flies out of your wallet that you're like, what am I getting back? What am I getting back? You're panicking.
Yes, exactly. And but there are jurisdictions like Greece, which you've got a customer base that likes to vent. When he's not happy about it, he likes to see somebody and he likes to shout. He likes to demonstrate. He likes to throw his weight around. He likes to get red in the face. He likes to use profanities. He has to vent somewhere. Online, he's got nowhere to do that.
Right.
So where he would be happiest is inside a casino. So what the casinos should have done in Greece, and are slowly getting there now, but again across Europe, is more and more land-based casinos should have taken the option to open an online um, operation themselves.
Yeah.
We have been proven that we're good administrators. We've been proven that we follow the laws. So we were the custodians of the online industry. Now what happened is that the online industry, apart from Belgium maintains that same regulation. If you run
Yes.
online, you can run land based. But in Greece, Regency haven't gone live yet, will be the only company in Greece that runs online and land-based. Now, that will tick a big box for the Greeks, which means what you mean, if something happens online, I can go to the casino and kick up a fuss. Yes, you can. Well, that will make them happy. And other countries in Europe will have exactly the same.
To me, that was always a logical step, because I mean, it's like, it creates confidence, it creates, the trust, and, at all times, it creates an outlet. And what really would be good is people that can also deposit the money in the physical casino, not having to, transfer it, whatever, and then, be nervous about, does it sit in my wallet, this and that. They can go to somebody, and if they are VIP, then really they're going to be treated well, because it's like, here's your wallet, here's your, etc. Anytime you have a question, come back to me, and have fun.
Yeah, exactly right. The only thing that a live casino would be hesitant is to get into the sports betting market, because we all know the history of particularly goalkeepers in Greece that have aided and abetting in allowing football results to go one way or the other. So, match fixing, and I think at one point that football in Greece was suspended from any form of sports betting on a game of football.
Now, this was a really interesting conversation, Ian, and we haven't touched on everything political yet. I still feel that, with my experiences in the Greek market when I was running, the Playboy Casino, I had a lot of issues with the government trying to push them very hard in order to get certain things done. They were absolutely blinded by it. I also believe that some of them were, let's say, being influenced by the larger casinos. And as a result, it became very difficult, to look at this fairly. I think that's still an issue. I think you have touched on a lot of points related to the mentality, related to, let's say, why certain things are a certain way. So in that sense, that's very clear. What is your prediction for the next 5 years? I mean, we haven't spoken about anything AI related or whatever, because that's a whole different subject altogether. But my fear is, personally, that we're going to see a lot of change in people's mentalities with regards to what they would like to do. Where is the entertainment going to go? Where am I going to spend my free time? Where am I going to, place my gamble? Prediction markets are going to, somehow pop up, no matter if it is in the same format as in the United States or a different type of format. not everything can be prohibited. How do you feel is this going to be dealt with? Because even in Greece, as you said, there's still a very big black market, and I just believe that people want to get a better shot at not just the entertainment and gambling, but knowing that they can have a better chance to win.
The European Casino Association has been talking about illegal black market gambling for a very long time. The talking's got to stop and the actions have got to start happening. I think you can talk subjects to death and then it loses interest because we're just rehashing. I think the ECA are the right body of people to really push this, and they need to do it, because if you're operating within any country within the EU or anywhere in the world, diminishing the size of the illegal market is benefit for everybody. Benefit for the government because they get more taxes. Benefit for employment because more people are employed, and less casinos go out of business. So tackling the illegal problem is very, very important. The other thing is, I think what needs to happen is, it's all right saying integrated resorts. Yep, integrated resorts are very nice to have, but can you create, or which country is currently in a position to create strong revenue streams from the non-gaming segment? Because without that, it will make the difference between staying in business or going out of business. You cannot have a gaming floor subsidizing every other outlet within the property. America saw that. If you look at Las Vegas now, where's the main revenue streams? It's certainly not gaming. I think
No.
gaming now is down to 20% of revenue on a strip casino. Okay, they're overcharging for rooms now. They're overcharging for shows. They're overcharging for food, but people pay it. In Greece or anywhere else in Europe, you're going to have to go through that growing pains to convert people that, well, because the mentality, as you said, is, well, you make so much money, surely you can give me a free dinner, surely you can give me
Exactly.
free drinks,
Yeah.
because that's the mentality of your customer. That has to change, and and the start needs to start now.
Yeah.
The other thing as well is this online. Yes, you've got to bring that closer. You've all got to be a master of all trades. You can't just, well, I'm live gaming and because still in the casinos after all these years, I'm a table game person. I obviously need to earn more money than him because he's a slots person.
Yeah.
Slots people are decried. Well, they're not quite as intelligent as us. The other thing is integrated resorts is, the hotelier or the hotel side are far more intelligent than the casino people. The casino people are viewed quite poorly because that, gamblers, men of the night, and all this bullshit. But, the hotel, if you ever look at a Sun International resort, it was never, ever a casino guy that was numero uno. It was always the hotel guys because they were considered to be the brains of the organization. So, there are some myths that need shattering, and there needs to be, you touched on it earlier, AI. Everybody, yes, I'm in AI. They're not. If you had, you and I were sat on a panel and we asked 300 people, who has an AI department? 4 people. How many of you are an AI officer within your casino? There wasn't one. It's like everybody wants to say, I'm on it, I'm dealing with it. Very few are.
They're not. And we haven't touched, on that subject, which is a subject on its own. Ian, I really like to thank you for this conversation. I think it was quite interesting. I would like to invite you back in the future, talking specifically about more of the international experience around. I mentioned Albania, in which you're active. I mentioned, well, I didn't mention, but you have been active in the Far East. And it's very interesting to really get an understanding of, let's say, the differences, because we've very much focused on the area where you're very active, today and have been. Now you're spreading your wings as going independent. So it's going to be quite interesting to see you, more around, etc. I think your knowledge is extremely well positioned and required in order to, get other projects off the ground. I think what we need to do together as an industry is to basically bring the brains together and basically say, where is our future? Because I think that we're all struggling with that question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much for allowing me to discuss some issues with you. I wish we could have touched on some of the more controversial things, but that's for another time.
Give me one to end with.
Look, we're all sitting here watching the United States because we think the United States is worth watching, only because the whole environment with the United States has changed and it continues to change. I'm sitting here in Crete, not very far away from the Suda base, which is an American aircraft base, but it's also the ships as well. So sitting here is a aircraft carrier. There are more jets in the air. There are more frigates floating around, and it sounds like they're preparing for war. And that's how it looks to me. The town is absolutely awash with servicemen, all dressed down so they don't look like military, but it's very hard to hide an American haircut that comes from the services. So it's strange. And when we think in the very near future, the president of the United States could become a major influence on the new casino that will be opening in New York. Now, we've seen Donald Trump have a gaming empire, and maybe in the not too distant future, Donald Trump will have another gaming empire based on his golf course out of New York. And that takes a lot of thinking.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will happen like that, but also I was in Albania, and the Gerard Kushner is viewing a major casino resort on the coast. And also, I was told by a very reliable source that the casino resort in Gaza is not all is not fake news. So it'll be very very interesting news if the president or ex-president of the United States gets back into the gaming business.
Exactly. Well, that definitely is worth another subject. So love to talk about that and look forward to the next one. Thank you very much, Ian, and enjoy your holiday.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Harpinion brings candid conversations with leaders and experts shaping gaming's political and regulatory future. Follow or visit harpinion.com for more episodes and updates.